Good evening, everyone. My name is Varun Soni, and I am the Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life here at the University of Southern California, where I also serve as the Vice Provost of Campus Wellness and Crisis Intervention. I'm so happy today to welcome you to the second event in our six-part Thrive series, which brings together global leaders, thinkers, and artists to answer the questions we are all asking ourselves right now. How do we thrive in the midst of a pandemic? And how do we live a good life with so much disruption, uncertainty, and anxiety around us? I'm very grateful to our sponsors for this series, Visions and Voices, Campus Wellbeing and Education, the Office of Cultural Relations and University Events, and the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life. I'm also very thankful to President Carol Folt for supporting and encouraging this series. And most of all, I'm super grateful to all of you for joining us this evening. Today, I'm broadcasting from the historic Bovard Administration Building, which is in the middle of our beautiful campus and in the heart of our stunning city. Before we begin this evening, I want to acknowledge that our beloved campus and city were built on the ancestral lands of the Tongva people. And so I want to take this moment to pay my respects to the Tongva elders, past, present, and future, who have stewarded this sacred land throughout the generations, and to honor their extraordinary traditions, identities, and stories, which are too often ignored and erased. Thank you. In 1965, the United States passed the historic Immigration and Naturalization Act, which opened the door to Asian immigration to the United States after 40 years of exclusion. In so many ways, I'm a child of the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act because it made my family's immigrant journey from India to the United States possible. At the time, you needed to be a physician or engineer to immigrate, and so I grew up in a family of Indian physicians and was expected to be one myself. But while my Indian American peers had already planned their medical residencies and fellowships by the age of 10, seriously, I found myself on a different path. What really interested me were the ultimate questions in life, questions like, why am I here? What is my purpose? What does it all mean? What matters to me? Why does it matter to me? Needless to say, when I told my physician parents I wanted to study and explore religion and spirituality as opposed to science and medicine, they were not that happy. But I soon realized that Indian parents will let their children do something if another Indian has been successful at it. At that time, there were only two well-known Indians in the United States, Deepak Chopra and Apu from The Simpsons. So thank God for Deepak Chopra. I kept pointing to Deepak as my role model, and eventually my parents relented and supported me, even though they kept reminding me that despite being a global spiritual thinker, Deepak is also a physician. And that is why I'm so profoundly grateful to Deepak, not only for his presence here today, but also and especially for my presence here today. Dr. Deepak Chopra is the founder of the Chopra Foundation, a nonprofit entity for research on well-being and humanitarianism, and Chopra Global, a modern-day health company at the intersection of science and spirituality. A world-renowned pioneer in integrative medicine and personal transformation, he is a clinical professor of family medicine and public health at the University of California, San Diego, and he serves as senior scientist with the Gallup Organization. He is the author of over 90 books translated into over 40 languages, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. And Time magazine described him as one of the top 100 heroes and icons of the century. His upcoming book, Total Meditation, Practices in Living the Awakened Life, comes out next week and is available for pre-order now. I strongly suggest everyone pick up a copy for yourself and everyone you know, because we all need real wisdom and insight on living the awakened life right now. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome him to USC today. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Deepak Chopra.
Thank you, Varun.
Thank you.
It's always a privilege and honor to speak to you.
So good to see you again. And I'm going to get right into it because there's a lot to talk about. It seems like we're living through historic times right now, almost biblical or apocalyptic in terms of scope. There's a plague, there's fires, there's hurricanes, there's civil unrest. Locusts recently descended upon India. And with all this volatility and all of this uncertainty, it's obvious why people are feeling so anxious. In fact, Americans are 3 times more anxious this year than they were last year. 3 times as many Americans are suffering from anxiety this year than last year. And so my question to you is, what is the root cause of this anxiety? And how do we move past it without it consuming us?
So, Varun, as a physician, I've encountered grief a lot in my career. And sometimes I've encountered people going through the process of grief in less than 1 hour. Working in the emergency room, I've seen people going through grief in 1 hour. They're in the midst of a heart attack, in the throes of a heart attack. It's very severe. They can see the panic around them and they feel panicked. And at a certain stage, it becomes very obvious to them that they're going to die. And the grieving starts right then. Grief goes through many stages. First, there's a feeling of victimization. And why me? Of course, right now, the pandemic includes global population. The second stage of grief that I've seen personally is anger as a result of the initial feeling of victimization, even hostility. The third stage is frustration, and then some kind of resignation, and ultimately feeling of hopelessness and desperation. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people go through these stages and stop there: hopelessness, desperation, and even die in the midst of that experience. It's a very tragic thing to see. In some cases, though, it moves to the next step after helplessness, and that step is called acceptance. And when you see acceptance in somebody's demeanor, even in the midst of a tragedy, you also see peace. And then something interesting comes out. It's called meaning. What is the meaning? So we are going through global grief right now. And some of us, like you, and there are others also, they're asking, what does it mean? And because you're the dean of religious studies and spiritual understanding of reality, I think the meaning right now is, as human beings, we take our existence for granted. As human beings, we take our existence for granted and we take awareness of existence for granted. And then suddenly something happens and say, what happened? Yeah. Now, when I was growing up and was 10 years of age, I read Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian sage, poet. He said that I exist is a perpetual surprise. And then he added something else. He said, if you're not perpetually surprised and grateful for your existence, then your humanity is incomplete. And I lived with that all my life, even as a physician. Gratitude for existence and even awareness of existence. Because if there's no awareness of existence, then there's no existence, at least for you and me. It has to be awareness. And if you start your day with gratitude, you will find meaning. And the meaning right now is very big. We can discuss that. And some of it is practical, and some of it is metaphysical, some of it is spiritual, and some of it actually points to a direction where humanity needs to go. So, but I'll leave it at that. We're going through grief and trying to find meaning.
And I want to pick up on that because that's exactly what I see on my campus. I see this loss, sense of loss and mourning that exacerbates people's feeling of grief. And the other part of it is the sense of loneliness. So much of what we do on our university campus is predicated on being together, from research to teaching to mentorship to creative expression to athletics to community service to patient care. It's all about being together, and we're not together. And I know many people in our community were already struggling with loneliness pre-pandemic, and the fact that they're physically distanced from the people they care most about has only increased their feeling of loneliness. What's the difference between being alone and feeling lonely? And what advice would you give people who are really struggling with these intense feelings of loneliness right now?
So again, going back to the wisdom tradition, especially of the East, we talk about the causes of suffering. And one of the causes of suffering is the illusion of the separate self, which is basically loneliness, being cut off from the web of existence and being alienated or feeling lonely and disconnected from others. In fact, it is that which results in anger and resentment and grievances, etc. We have a deep need to be connected. And one of the five kleshas, one of the five causes of suffering in the Eastern traditions, is exactly that, the experience of the separate self, which at the most fundamental level is actually a construct that we are separate. It's a mental construct, it's a human mental construct. And when we experience that, of course, then we get disconnected and we get all those feelings of anger and resentment and grievances, hostility, which then creates biological expression as inflammation, stress, lack of self-regulation, lack of homeostasis, a lot of medical consequences of that. And people are definitely feeling that right now. Now, for those who have understood the difference between solitude and loneliness, or who have cultivated solitude, actually, this is a time where they can feel connected with all that exists. Solitude is being connected to all that exists. And loneliness, of course, is a marker or precedes biological illness, including everything that's as a result of stress. Stress being the perception of feeling threatened, and loneliness is a perception of feeling threatened. So those who have cultivated solitude know the difference between solitude and loneliness. But also, humans bond in two ways. One is emotionally, and the other is physically. And of course, there's a third way, which is spiritual bonding. Now, mammals, all animals that don't lay eggs, but animals that give birth to babies, as soon as the baby is born, they bond with the baby through physical means. It's a physical bonding. It's through touch, it's through kissing and cuddling, even licking and touching and hugging. And of course, in case of mothers, breastfeeding and very intimate physical contact, which actually is responsible for the development of that part of our brain that we call the emotional brain, called the limbic brain. And what it requires is not only that physical contact. You know, the baby is watching its mother and looks at her eye expressions, the tone of her voice, the eye movements, facial expressions, body language in general. And all the baby is looking for is four things. Attention. Because, you know, when the baby feels distressed, either wants to urinate or wants to have its diaper changed or feels hungry, it says, ah, and the mother is attentive. So it's looking for attention. It's looking for affection. There's some sign from mother that she loves and is caring for this baby. And that's the second thing it's looking for. The third thing, as the baby starts to get an identity, a self, ego identity, it's looking for appreciation, noticing the baby's talents, unique gifts. And the fourth thing, which most parents don't realize, is total acceptance. We're always trying to change our children according to how we want them to be. Your parents, they wanted you to be a doctor, okay? Total acceptance means I want you to do what you want to do with your life. So right now, because we are physically distanced, and humans can't be physically distanced for long, they need this touch, physical contact, as I mentioned. It's part of the limbic brain. But for now, we can engage in this kind of thing in our families. If we are sequestered, lonely with our families, and then remember the 4 A's: attention, affection, appreciation, acceptance. And by the way, if this is causing problems in your family, then you didn't have a good relationship with your family to begin with. So start to question that. How can I be the change right now by giving attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance? And extend that to your social network, even through social media, through Zoom, through FaceTime, through emoticons. You can give a dopamine hit to somebody's South Africa just by sending them an emoji right now. Or you could cause them distress by insulting them, and their cortisol level will go up. Having said all this is all going to pass. When I was, you said this is apocalyptic. Well, I remember my childhood. My father was talking about the atomic bomb, about the Holocaust, about Hitler, about global distress during the Second World War. My grandfather talked about in 1918 about the pandemic, then the influenza pandemic, when millions of people died, and the war. And his father talked about the Indian Civil War, or what the British called the mutiny, and we call it the War of Independence, on and on. So, if you look at history, this has happened every generation since the Middle Ages. What is different now, though, is that we are still, in general, living like people lived in the Middle Ages, in medieval times. Ethnocentrism, racism, bigotry, hatred, extreme nationalism, trade wars, eco-destruction, disregard for other species. But we have modern capacities, nuclear weapons, mechanized death, and we have also caused climate change. So the deeper meaning right now of this loneliness is the ecosystem, the biosphere, is saying to humans, go back to your cages. We need to fix ourselves. And if I look out of my window right now, I see actually a clearer sky. I'm told that people in Bangalore are breathing for the first time, that fish are returning to dead lakes. Even the canals of Venice are seeing fish for the first time, that you can see Himalayas from the 500 miles away. And the birds are singing and bees are back. 90% of our nutrition on this planet depends on bees and birds, believe it or not, despite industrial food production. And they're back. They were disappearing. So to me, the deeper meaning is it's all connected. It's the bigotry, the hatred, the fear, the racism, the history of slavery, the history of indentured workers, and now modern capacities, internet hacking, biological warfare, internet destruction of democracies, the hatred and divisiveness. All of this is connected. Mutations as viruses, some people think occur because of random mutations, but it's also clear they occur as toxicity in the ecosystem of life. And that ecosystem of life is the genetic information of this planet in the microbes, in the virome, in the mycome, in the fungi, the bacteria, and the viruses. Corona has existed for 55 million years. Humans have existed for 200,000 years. And so, the COVID-19 is so-called because the mutation in 2019. But, and we'll have a vaccine, by the way. We will have a vaccine. A lot of people are working globally. And believe it or not, the vaccine is going to be coming from either Europe or China or Russia or India, because the United States is not cooperating. Hopefully it can come from here as well. But there will be a vaccine. However, the deeper meaning is something we need to address. How do we collectively, and this is where you and your students come in, how do we collectively engage in an effort where we're not only thinking about ourselves, but about each other, about how do we harness our love and our compassion and our empathy collectively? And there's a new science called emergence, we can talk about it, to actually use this as an opportunity to not only heal ourselves, but heal the world, to help create that critical mass of consciousness for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. This is the opportunity, notwithstanding that we paid a high price in terms of tragedy, economic loss, stress, inflammation, and distress.
So, that makes me think about Shiva, Nataraj, the Hindu deity who's often depicted as the divine dancer or the lord of destruction. And as you know, as part of Hindu theology, destruction is a necessary precondition for creation, that the birth of the new can only arise after the death of the old. And as the world goes through this shared experience of suffering right now, it feels like we'll never go back to the way things were, that we're in a profound transition period between the death of the old and the birth of the new. And it sounds like you're hopeful that this pandemic could start an evolution of human consciousness, a new global awakening, perhaps, based on renewal and healing. If we're going to build this world, how do we do it? And what does the science of emergence tell us about that?
So, Varun, you said something very interesting since you brought in Shiva. The five aspects of Shiva are creation, then as Vishnu, maintenance, then destruction, then incubation, and then resurrection, to be born again, completely new. So what we are being asked right now, or given the opportunity right now, is for a new story. The old story we know: slavery, indentured labor, conquest, colonialism, extreme nationalism, extreme selfishness. 2% of the people in the world controlling 98% of the economy of the world. It can't go on. If we live the way we've lived in the past, then humanity is on a collective suicide mission. Collective suicide. It could be anything. It could be climate change. It could be nuclear weapon. It could be massive epidemics like the one we are seeing, but even worse with mass migrations, epidemics that lead to violence and catastrophes and trade wars and all the stuff that we're seeing right now. But if we don't understand that this collective behavior right now is actually ensuring an extinction for the human species, then we're declaring our insanity. Honestly, we are declaring our insanity. We have to be sober about this. The last extinction was 65 million years ago when a meteorite fell on this planet, and the explosion that occurred was the equivalent of an atomic bomb, and dinosaurs were wiped out in 1 hour. 1 hour, by the way. Today, we have the capacity to destroy the world 17 to 20 times over that particular. So we can easily cause extinction. It's remarkable that an accident hasn't happened. Even with smartphones, you can interfere with electricity, cut off the food chain supply, interfere with pacemakers, on and on. I don't want to give people ideas. But the same technologies can also help us heal the world. It's very obvious that we have a choice right now, collectively. So what is the science of emergence? The science of emergence is exactly what I'm talking about. The death of an old story and the resurrection of a new story. When you look at stories, you see, and humans are storytellers. We are the only species on this planet who tells stories. And actually our stories shape our behavior. In India, we say even the body is a story. It's a karmic story is your body. Everything is a story. And it's not only the story, but it's the interpretation of a story. So a story has many elements. It has heroes, it has villains, it has good guys, it has bad guys, it has a love theme usually, it has crises, it has death, it has people victimized, people falling down, people getting up. So there's all the elements are there in a Bollywood or a Hollywood soap opera of a good story. And they're all there in our mythics, in our mythologies as well. Mahabharata, Ramayana, the Bible, they're all amazing stories of the human condition. A story has context, it has meaning, it has relationship, it has characters, it has a theme, and it also has conflict, contradiction, paradox, redemption. And all good stories are love stories. So what we are seeing now, I hope, is the death of old meanings, old contexts, old ways of handling relationships, and ultimately all stories. That needs to die. And then what needs to be born again is a new story. Actually, that's the meaning of the word to be born again. The resurrection of Christ is exactly that, to be born again. It's also the virgin birth, a new story. And it's there in every tradition in the world. So we don't need to go into the history of it. What we need is new context, new meaning, new story, new relationship, and an amazing love story in the end. Okay, so how do we do that? First of all, we don't deny the past. The history of slavery, indentured workers, colonialism, injustice, rape, pillage, murder, exploitation, even today in the world, by a small minority of people exploiting the rest of the world, is intolerable and will not be tolerated. So resurrection means not only new wine in an old bottle, but a new wine in a new bottle, in a new cask. Okay, the old story has to go completely. And what is the new story? A more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Those are all very important words. Peace, sustainability, health, joy, social justice, economic justice. Those are the ingredients. A more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. So how do we do this? The science of emergence says when you have maximum diversity of people in a group, however big the group or however small, maximum diversity means racial diversity, ethnic diversity, maybe national diversity, but also diversity of backgrounds, philosophers, poets, storytellers, spiritualists or spiritual people, people from the various faith groups, religion, but also science, also technologists, also neuroscientists, also cosmologists, also ecologists, maximum diversity of people. First criteria, racial, ethnic, gender equality and diversity, but also background. Second criteria is shared vision. Shared vision is what we're talking about. More peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Number three is complementing each other's strengths, because we all have different strengths and different skills and different backgrounds and different education. So that's the third criterion for emergence. The fourth is transparency and open systems, open platforms, total open, and responsibility for feedback, not getting offended by criticism, because every criticism is also feedback, not being personally offended. And then actually incubating together in self-inquiry, in self-reflection, in even spiritual practice like transcendence, mantra, meditation, prayer, sitting together, engaging in reflection, inquiry, contemplation, transcendence, and mindful awareness. And then what happens? Emergence happens by itself. A new story is born, a new context, a new meaning. You have to be patient without being negligent, and you have to support each other. And this is what the meaning of Sangha is. The Buddhists say, take refuge in the Sangha, the community, the global community. Right now, we can create a global community, which is something we're doing with our campaign called neveralone.love, www.neveralone.love, part of the Chopra Foundation initiative. But we also have a chatbot there called PV. And this PV's nickname for a young woman artist who unfortunately died of suicide. And so we named it in her honor, this chat box. This can identify, by the way, within a few seconds, if somebody is depressed or feeling lonely or even suicidal, and it can intervene. We launched the chat box only a week ago, and we've already had 30 suicide interventions and tens of thousands of people engaging in this. So take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha now is our global community. It could be your university community as well, as part of a bigger Sangha. Take refuge in the Dharma. Dharma means our calling at this moment, which is not only about me, it's about we, and it's about all of us. And take refuge in the Dharma, which is ultimate purpose in life, including the Dharma of truly understanding who we are, what is our purpose for existence, what is our calling at this moment, and what are we grateful for. If we do this, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Buddha, Buddha being a metaphor for expanded awareness, and the Sangha, I think we can expect emergence.
Part of the goal of this series is to think about how do we thrive or flourish in the midst of the chaos. And American culture tells us that our goal should be happiness, or at least the pursuit of happiness. But happiness to me seems like a trap because happiness comes and goes, and it's often based on the external conditions of the world. Is there another goal for us as human beings other than happiness, something that's self-generated, that endures over time? Could it be joy or thriving or awakening or what the ancient Greek philosophers called eudaimonia, which is like the art of living? What should our goal be in terms of well-being?
Well, the ultimate goal, Varun, for humans is self-realization, which means understanding who am I or what am I beyond my body and mind and world experience. The body is a perceptual changing experience. In fact, there's no such thing as a body. The body is a verb and not a noun. You begin as a fertilized ovum, then you're a zygote, then you're an embryo, then you're a baby, and then you're a toddler, and on, then you get to be old, and then you die. And so what is the body? The body is a perceptual and cognitive activity. Where? In consciousness. Okay, it's a verb. It's a process. So is the mind. The mind is a changing stream of thoughts and feelings and emotions. So one has to see, who am I beyond body and mind? That's the purpose of spiritual practice. Final goal. Okay. And when we experience that from within ourselves, then we know the difference between happiness, joy, equanimity, authentic equanimity, and loss of the fear of death. So happiness for a reason, the pursuit of happiness for a reason has been promoted as the American dream, which means, do you have an automobile? Do you have an automobile? If you have one, do you have two? Do you have a house? Does it have one garage or two garages? And on and on. Now, do you live in the suburbs? And, have you fulfilled the American dream? Well, when people fulfill that dream, they're not necessarily happy. In fact, I know two categories of people who are extremely unhappy. One is the very, very poor, because they can't think of anything other than money to survive. And then there's some of the very, very, very rich who can also not think of anything other than money. They confuse net worth with self-worth. In fact, the people I know whose net worth is enormous, enough to feed millions of children, have very poor self-worth. So they don't have any joy or happiness. The fundamental condition of our being is what you and I know in Sanskrit is called Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means the truth of existence. We exist, and we should be surprised that we exist. Chit, we are aware of our existence. Chit is awareness, is the basis of all knowledge and wisdom. And Ananda, bliss or joy or the peace that passes understanding for no reason whatsoever. You see it in every baby born. Do you need to see joy? Just look at a baby that almost, you see babies bubbling with joy for no reason whatsoever unless they're wet or hungry, period. So that's our innate condition. We don't have to pursue it. We have to go home to where we started from. T.S. Eliot, we shall not cease from exploration. And the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from and know the place for the first time. So this is an opportunity to enjoy solitude, to engage in emotional intelligence, to tell people we care for them, to even have resources to help them. Now, as part of our Never Alone campaign, by the way, we have created a blockchain, and even we are in the process of creating a cryptocurrency called Love in Action Tokens, where people can consult others and also be paid for their counseling through blockchain. As you know, blockchain is very traceable. There's no special interest groups. You can track where the content came from. You can exchange resources, not only intellectual resources, but emotional resources and techniques for resilience, but also help people pay for consultations if they need to. This is the new story that's emerging.
During this pandemic, 40% of college students around the country have adopted a new spiritual practice or utilized a new mental health resource. And many of those students are turning to meditation for the first time. In fact, our mindfulness classes at USC have 4 times as many people this year taking a class as opposed to last year. Throughout your career, you've been one of the great, I'd say the great evangelist for meditation in the world today. You and Oprah have trained over 10 million people online through your 21-day challenge, and your new book, which comes out next week, is called Total Meditation. What advice would you give people who have started a meditation practice or who are looking to start a meditation practice for the first time? And what should they know about meditation as a practice, as a habit, from both spiritual and scientific perspectives?
Yeah, in total meditation, I make the point that just as your body is naturally inclined to go into a state of self-regulation, so is your mind. But there are certain things you need to pay attention to. I call these the pillars of well-being. The first is good sleep. If you haven't had good sleep, you're going to be stressed, your body is going to be fatigued. The second is the practices we broadly call meditation, mindfulness, which includes many things: self-inquiry, concentration, contemplation, self-reflection, mindful awareness of perceptual activity, mindful awareness of the body, of the breath, of the viscera, of mental space, of the web of relationship, mindful awareness of my relationship connection with the universe and all of that. So these are practices that broadly come under the category of meditation. There's a lot of research that when you practice meditation, your body begins to heal itself. Genes that cause self-regulation go up, some 17-fold. Genes that cause inflammation, they go down significantly. The level of the enzyme telomerase goes up very significantly, sometimes even by 40%, means your biological clock for aging is reset. So there's thousands of scientific references on the biological effects of meditation. But then meditation also helps us emotionally communicate in a whole manner without any violence. We communicate through what you call ahimsa as a result of meditation, never introducing violence in our conversations. So the second pillar is meditation. They're not necessarily in importance. I'm just mentioning the various pillars right now, well-being. The third is emotional resiliency, but also cultivating love, compassion, joy, equanimity in relationship, because these practices enhance healing and homeostasis and self-regulation. The fourth is your diet. And now it's very clear that if we take a diet that has maximum diversity in plant-based foods, and if you eat meat or fish, it comes from an organic source, not from a factory. If you avoid food that is manufactured, refined, processed, or has chemicals in it, petroleum products, which most manufactured food has, or if you avoid refined sugar, then our diet can actually change the population of the 2 million bacterial genes in our body. We only have 25,000 human genes. Those bacterial genes, of which, by the way, viruses are also part of that population. We call it the virome and the mycome and all that, the good ones. So we can change that population through diet. So diet is very important in introducing self-regulation, healing, and changing your genomic information in the body, most of it, more than 90% of it. The fifth pillar is what I would call exercise, but not in the way, going to the gym and having a hard workout. If you move 10,000 steps a day, if you do practice deep breathing, and if you practice any of the martial arts, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong or deep breathing practices or pranayama, this stimulates a nerve in the body called the vagus nerve, which is the healing nerve. It counteracts the effects of sympathetic overdrive, which causes stress and inflammation in the body. So mind-body practices. in addition to meditation and exercise. And finally, some connection with nature. So if you walk on the beach barefoot, or even on the earth barefoot, or you touch a tree, or you're connected to the earth, you restore your circadian rhythms, which are your biological rhythms, and negative ions come from the earth into your body, which neutralize the excess free radicals that cause both physical and mental distress. So those are the main pillars of well-being that I'm emphasizing every day globally. But having said that, I think ultimately even that is not going to get rid of what the wisdom tradition says is ultimate human suffering, which is existential suffering, which is not knowing who we really are, being afraid of old age, being afraid of infirmity, and of course, right now, being afraid of death. For that, only a spiritual practice can help us.
My final question to you this evening is a personal one. What have you learned about what is most essential to you during this time of pandemic?
Something I've suspected for a long time. We are walking around in a daze, sleepwalking. You know, Wittgenstein, the great German philosopher, said, our life is a dream, we're asleep. But once in a while, we wake up enough to know that we're dreaming. So what I've learned is that this is an opportunity for all of us to wake up.
Beautiful. Deepak, I know I speak on behalf of our entire Trojan family when I say how grateful we are for your generosity of time and spirit today, and for your work and wisdom in the world when we need it most. You've truly enriched and enlightened us, and we are so, so thankful. On a personal note, you know I will always be profoundly indebted to you for your inspiration and support, and for empowering me to tell a new story about my life. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Varun,
Dr.
before
Deepak
you
Chopra.
go, Varun, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I want you and your students to know we are there and we are part of your family. And let's collaborate together to be the change we want to see in the world.
We will definitely do that. I look forward to that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Varun.
I also want to thank everyone who's watching for joining us this evening for the second conversation in our Thrive series featuring Dr. Deepak Chopra. I strongly suggest all of you pick up a copy of Deepak's new book, Total Meditation, and buy and gift copies to everyone you know. And also check out Deepak and Oprah's 21-day meditation challenge, which you can find online. I'm also happy to invite all of you to join us again for our next conversation in this Thrive series on October 5th, featuring your friend and mine, Rainn Wilson. Please check out the Visions and Voices website for more information. Until next time, please take good care of yourselves and each other. Thank you, and fight on.